Every municipal election cycle, voters mark their ballots for school board trustee. At least some of them do. Actually, not very many do at all, despite the fact that trustees are the longest-standing elected officials in the province. But just as so much else has changed in the education system, some now wonder whether it's an office we still need. Here to consider that, Maddie DiMuccio. She is president at the Society for Quality Education. And Howard Goodman is here. He's formerly vice president of the Ontario Public School Boards Association, a past Toronto District School Board trustee, and founder of advocate.ca. That's a website devoted to promoting strong public schools. And it's, Howard, good to have you here. First time in a long time.
Thank you.
Maddie, we saw you more recently. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Just before we get to sort of the overarching philosophical discussion here, there is some so-called news of the day that I'd like you both to weigh in on. York Region, just north of us, obviously had municipal elections back in October, and literally a couple of months after those elections, one school board trustee, Anna DeBartolo, represents Vaughan. She said she's resigning for personal reasons. So literally 2 months after Election Day, we now find ourselves thrust into a decision. The board has decided to spend $177,000 to hold a by-election to replace her, as opposed to just appoint somebody. I'd like to get your views on the advisability of doing that. Maddie.
You know, this is a tough one for me, Steve, because the first inclination is the fiscal taxpayer in me, and is to say that's outrageous, that's a lot of money for a school board trustee to have an election that many people don't even vote in a general election, let alone a by-election. However, it was Winston Churchill who said that democracy is the worst form of government except for everything else. And so this is very much symbolic, I think. The board, we're 60 days into the term already. And so that's not a lot. If it was in the latter half of the term, then I would say, yes, appoint somebody. But, you know, just for the sake of democracy and for that reason, I think that that's why they're feeling pressured to have that by-election.
Got it. Howard, your view.
I agree with Maddie completely on this one. I've been through that process a couple times when I was a trustee at TDSB. We had some vacancies, and we had a serious set of conversations on this issue, because I think we were talking about $150,000 instead of $177,000. It's a lot of money. And it came down to timing. Towards the last year, didn't really matter, we appointed. But before that, it is important, it is critically important for trustees to have connection to their community, right? The philosophical thing about democracy is true, but there's also a very practical implication when a trustee is elected, because then parents and others get to freely call them, and they have trust in them, and they actually believe that they own the trustee.
Charlene Grant came second. Why not just appoint her to fill the vacancy?
Well, I have the numbers.
Okay. Go ahead.
So Anna got 4,400 votes. Charlene got 2,100. Can't remember her first name. Goldberg, Naomi, I think, got 1,200. There were many people, almost certainly, who would have run if Anna wasn't running. And it's not clear whether the overwhelming numbers, even if nobody else was running, whether the overwhelming numbers that Anna had would have been distributed in the same proportion.
Got it. Fair
I have something to say about that, though. I sort of do agree, but on the other hand, Steve, Charlene, I think the person who is running, Charlene, if she were to run, I would normally agree with you and say, you know what, just appoint her, she came in second. But she's running on a platform of anti-racism and inclusivity. And if she did not run on that, if she was just appointed, it would undermine that message, which I think is so important to York Region right now when it comes to the school trustees. So on that alone, I think that, appointing her, yes, that makes a lot of practical sense. But on the other hand, for her to run on that platform and win on that platform would actually give that message a stronger.
Yes.
Let us depart here from this screaming agreement between the two of you and get into something
for
a little more contentious.
I'm not sure we're going to get into conflict here.
Well, let's see.
We'll find
you never know.
Let's see. Well, we're not looking for it, but if it happens, c'est la vie. Obviously, with so few people participating in trustee elections and not very many people following all of the issues around this, it does raise a question of whether or not we even need trustees anymore. And I'd like both of you to weigh in on the issue of trustees, yes or no, abolish them, keep them, what do you think? Maddie, start us off.
You know, this is a great question, and it's something that I want to reverberate on every level of government. Steve, as you know, I used to be a municipal councillor in Newmarket. We've got 9 councillors for a very small population. So if anything, we need less politicians, and that includes less trustees. It seems right now that there are so many problems going on with these people running, and you know, they're not experienced. They don't have a lot of political savvy.
But let me be sure I understand you here. You want fewer trustees, or you want no trustees?
We'll get into that conversation. I would be as willing to go as far as say, no, we don't need trustees. But we also don't need as many councillors. We don't need as many MPPs because they all agree with their leader. You know, we don't need as many MPs. At the end of the day, these are all symbolic positions, and it's costing taxpayers a lot of money, and sometimes they make the news for the wrong reasons, as we're seeing in York Region.
Howard, your view on whether we need trustees?
So we have a disagreement.
Okay. I had a hunch, Howard.
There are, let's look at some of the alternatives to start with. There's, I think, only 3 possible ways of providing school board governance. And governance is critical. Every organization has a board of some sort and oversight. And so we can either have them elected, which is what we're dealing with.
Which is what we've done for 150 years, frankly.
Yep. We could have it run by the bureaucracy, which is a problem because they will never, ever say no to the provincial powers. And the province makes mistakes all the time. And trustees, elected trustees, push back. Or we can appoint them. An appointment sounds like a really good idea. It sounds like it's fantastic. You can get experts who are balanced.
Appointed by whom?
By whoever. Okay. We don't even
go into... That's not the issue here.
That's not the issue, just the appointment. But then you get a balanced board of expertise. You got lawyers and accountants and marketing people and public health people and stuff. But what happens is they're not connected to the community, and they don't really care as much. And so if you look at board of directors of major corporations, you look at Volkswagen, you look at Lehman Brothers, you look at Nortel, you look at Briex, you look at Sears, you look at Apple when they threw out Steve Jobs and put in John Scully. These are boards with fantastic expertise and profile, and they blew it because they weren't able to understand what the operations were like. And the purpose of having elected trustees, the biggest thing, is that when something's going wrong in a school, and it's representative of many things in other schools, the parent or the community knows who to call. They feel comfortable in calling.
Let me follow up, Maddie, on that, because you have 3 kids, right? All of whom were in the school system. And I don't know, presumably somewhere along the way, if you had a problem with one of your kids' education, you had a trustee you could call.
Right, and they didn't really do very much. In fact, I ran into a trustee, our own trustee, who said, I actually avoid the public because they always come up to me and they want to talk about their school and their, the issues they have. And I was sort of looking at her like she had 2 heads and thinking, well, that is your job. So here's the thing, Steve. It's funny how you mention, community and being the first face in that community. The reality is, in York Region, school trustees cover a wide community. They don't just cover one municipality. They cover several municipalities. They are not the front line, as a matter of fact. The frontline people are the parents and the principals. And I've always been a big proponent of having elected school councils that are unpaid, they're volunteer, and having the principal having the authority to do more. And yesterday we heard in the news in Ontario that the Ontario government is now prepared to give those powers and more authority to those school principals, which actually I think is a great idea.
But
here's the thing about the school board, Steve. We've got school boards that are bloated and huge administration, and they are pretty much running the show. Well, the province is pretty much giving them, this is what you have to do, and they're doing it. And the school board trustees are pretty much, just reading the agenda and saying, yeah, okay.
But if you have a problem with the principal, if you have a problem with the director of education, who do you go to, if not a trustee?
You go to the parent council. So my vision is to have a parent council. And in the past, Steve, we had 1 school board per school, and that school board would be, accountable to the people. That they would have a trustee, and that they would be accountable to the people. But now it's different. Now they wanted to shrink the school boards, and they've done that. But in fact, they've actually bloated them because they've just added so much bureaucracy.
Howard, what about the notion of a school council as opposed to a trustee? Volunteers as opposed to elected people, unpaid as opposed to modestly paid.
So I was a school council chair before I was a trustee. I was a very active parent. on the local thing. And I have to say that there is nothing that a school council can do to prevent a misguided decision by the ministry.
Because what? They have no authority at the end of the day.
Not only do they have no authority, they have no platform. They can deal with an issue in the school, perhaps. Teacher not behaving properly, some structural things in the building, but they cannot, if a policy comes down from the province, organizing 1,000 schools to protest that issue when the schools are not connected and they're not across the province is a problem. York is an unusual case, and I know that's where your experience is, but every school board has a different culture, and the York culture has a very unusual history that was fostered by two very excellent, strong, long-term bills, Bill Hogarth and Bill Carruthers, who were there for 15 years.
Let's get this bigger. I want to make the bigger point.
The point
here
is that in terms of a school board not doing its job, that I can understand that would be your experience. But that is not the experience of in boards across the province.
Well, let me get personal with you, Howard.
Okay.
You were a trustee.
Yes.
Why'd you want to be a trustee?
My motivation was I had time on my hands. I wanted help. I had little kids. I watched the system following policies set by the province at the time that were not good for schools and not good for my kids. And I knew as a school council chair that I could do very little because my knowledge was limited, my access to information was limited, my access to influence was limited.
So if the position were eliminated, what would be lost in your view?
Oh, a whole bunch. The number of pushbacks that have happened, well, let me give you a couple specific examples. I'll try not to get in trouble.
Can't think of any examples.
No, I'm trying not to get in trouble. My mother said, don't get into trouble today. There was a contract that had been signed by TDSB that had gone south and was being renegotiated. And the board management did not do a good job of that. And the board pushed back hard and generated $1 million because the negotiations went better. Another one is an appointed supervisor back in 2003 decided to launch a change of pension rights, which would have led to a $60 million lawsuit. The province agreed. Like it was a political decision, politically motivated. The trustees, when we learned about it and forced information out of the director, realized that it was a bad decision. And, and that could not happen.
The gist of these examples is that there's a sort of a corporate governance / oversight role that ultimately saved money. Well, and we have corporate governances on municipal level as well. But let's talk about the Police Services Board. They have a board. They don't have a trustee or somebody oversight with them. You know, we don't need to have boards. My point is this. Sorry, we don't need to have the trustees because, like I said earlier, the parent councils can do exactly what the trustees have done. The trustees are not appointed. They are elected democratically. They're not necessarily experienced. They don't necessarily have the credentials. So you can't go back and say, well, parent councils wouldn't have the, you know, they shouldn't be doing that because they don't have credentials. They don't have experience.
I didn't say credentials.
As a matter of fact, they have more experience, I would argue, that a parent. And I was a parent who was very, very much involved in my children's education. I was literally in this school every single day in kindergarten for about 2 years. So I really saw a lot of the issues that were going on in the schools. Who better than to have those parents to really give the mandate, right? To really have the authority to say, this is what we want, this is how we're going to spend the money, this is, you know, who we believe should be running the board and should be in that position. So who better than the parents? Let me ask you the follow-up then. Based on your experience and the number of trustees that you've met over the years, why do you think people run for this job? Well, that's a good question. People run for this job. First of all, it does, as you can probably confirm, it doesn't pay very well.
right? It doesn't pay very well.
Nope.
York Region, I think they get a stipend of about $20,000 a year. I think a lot of people, Steve, who run for this position is because they either have children in school or they feel very strongly about policies. Many of them are going into it because they see something they don't like in the system, just like most politicians will get into this and say, I don't like this, and they want to go and change it without realizing the intricacy that's involved. So you've got this big, massive machine that is the provincial government that really hands the mandate over to the board and said, here's what you can do. Here's your money, but here are the policies, here's the curriculum, here are your budgets. This is what, can be allocated. So you've got, they want to go and change that without realizing that changing that is very, very difficult because of this big machine of
Howard, if there were term limits, would that, do you think, improve the confidence people had in trustees more?
I think it would improve confidence. I don't think it would change much because there's massive turnover, unlike in other levels of elected officials. There's massive turnover at school boards. So the problem of having people there for 30 years uncontested doesn't typically happen.
Well, it does. If I can
flashbacks.
interrupt, it does very much in York Region. We had, in the public school board and the Catholic school board, we've had incumbents there that have been there for years and years and years. And today, they're seniors, okay? They'd be considered seniors. Now, just in this last election, the public school board trustee was finally somebody, won that seat. But they should have term limits because it should reflect the society at the time, right? We shouldn't have people that are seniors that are going into these jobs because they don't really understand what the things that are going on, the issues that young kids at school are facing.
I agree.
So we need to have that.
I agree.
We need to have term limits, 100%.
I'm looking at the numbers here in the last election in the public school boards. 21% of the incumbents who are running were defeated across the province.
And do you know why it's difficult to be defeated? Because they cover such a wide space. Who would put in all that money to run? You're covering maybe 9 municipalities, right? Who would put in that money for a $20,000 job? Your message is not getting out. The person goes to the ballot. They have no idea who the school trustee is. Oh, it's the same guy. I'll just vote for him.
20% is a huge number. It is not, you will not find that in any other of the 3 elected levels. Never. They're in the 5–10% range if you look. And I did last election, don't have the numbers in front of me. The turnover, the number of new trustees on boards across the province public school boards was 44%.
Well, I'm looking from the York Region perspective,
and that's the problem.
We've had these guys forever.
Okay, so the problem is that if you have the narrow perspective of a single school or a single board, you cannot deal with, as you call it, the monolith that's the provincial government.
Okay, tell me this then, Howard. I mean, the turnout in municipal elections is usually about 25–30% anyway, and my hunch is the people who actually mark a ballot for a trustee is probably half that, just because the name recognition is not terribly high and they don't have big budgets to campaign and so on. How do you have any ideas as to how we might be able to get the turnout levels higher for trustees and have people engaging on those more so that when people voted, they actually knew who they were voting for?
Okay, so there's 2 questions there. How do we get the turnout up? And the fall off between council and trustees, from what I can tell and looking at data over the years, is about 20%. The problem is the knowledge, because from some analysis I've done, about 80% of those votes cast are not knowledgeable votes. So they're sort of random, including people who voted for me, right? So
they recognize the name and they put a check beside it.
Right. And that's about it. Or they don't even, they like the look of the name, which is even worse.
Well, and your name would be helpful. You're a good man.
On the first one, I was at the bottom of the ballot, which is not good.
But you're still a good man.
Yeah, and so it helps.
Requires effort from the
requires
voter.
Right. So the point is they're largely random votes. And here, I am profoundly connected to elections because they make the sort of connection that you want to the parents. General elections I don't think work because of the reasons it doesn't get enough attention, it's expensive to run, it's over a broad area, you're not setting laws, right? I would rather have the York board take this opportunity to experiment with another way of doing it.
Like what?
One idea that has been floating around that I sort of like, but not sure if it works well, is having parents vote, and only parents vote.
Parents with kids in the school system?
Parents with kids in the school system,
Oh.
and that's it. And it would be cheap to run because the voting list is already held by the school board.
And it's a somewhat more motivated cohort of people to vote.
Motivated and knowledgeable.
And knowledgeable.
Right? They understand the issues.
I got a
and they
minute
look.
left. Maddie, what would you think of that idea?
I have some problems with it, only because I think, you would ask your average voter taxpayer and saying, I have a right to decide what kids should be taught. I'm paying taxes into the system. It's a good idea, but I don't know if it would really work democratically speaking. And at the end of the day, I've always believed that having just the parent councils, we don't have to go through the trouble of having school trustees and having them vote. It's very difficult to get people engaged. The media plays a big part of that. Most people have no clue what a trustee is. Now and they're in the news for the wrong reasons, right? So now people are going to probably say, oh, I don't want to get involved with, these, who knows? It could be a good thing that they're in the media for the wrong reasons, and maybe people are going to say, they're going to get more motivated to say, I'm going to go out there and vote.
Well, we don't know how deeply the provincial government is mulling eliminating trustees altogether, but we thank the two of you for coming in and helping us understand the debate at foot.
Thank you.
That's Maddie DiMuccio and Howard Goodman. Thanks, you two.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Maddie.
Thank you.
The Agenda with Steve Bacon is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario, helping businesses stay on the right side of change with strategic thinking, insightful decisions, and business leadership. Are you on the right side of change? Ask an Ontario CPA.